Husband seeks revenge and walks away after DNA test confirms cheating wife's baby isn't his. Joseph and Jessica first met at a church event in their East Coast city. They shared many interests: the beach, movies, professional sports, running, volleyball, and parties. Everyone thought they were a perfect match. They became a couple during a volleyball tournament when Joe's friend Liam, who was supposed to be Jessica's partner, had to drop out. He called them and said, "I can't play. You two should team up for the tournament." They agreed and practiced a bit before the tournament. Jessica was fearless, diving for the ball and setting it up well. Joe was tall and strong, delivering powerful punches. They were perfect partners on the court. They won the tournament and celebrated with other teams at a bar. Jessica frequently touched Joe, showing great interest in him, and he was captivated by her beauty and touch. That evening, they went to her apartment. She kicked off her shoes and relaxed on the sofa, and he sat next to her. "Wow, what an incredible day," Jess sighed. "This means a lot to me too," Joe said. "When Liam couldn't play, I thought we'd lose. When he introduced us, I thought you were cute, but didn't expect we'd win." "Well, we did," Jess replied. "I think you're amazing at volleyball." "Do you really think I'm cute?" "Something like that. The win and the party made everything feel surreal." "I really like you," Joe said quickly, kissing her forehead. "I couldn't have imagined today would be this good," Joe continued. "It's unreal when a friend asks you to team up with someone so attractive that you can't focus. Then it turns out she's not just pretty, but really good at volleyball too." "Yes, it was a great day," Jess said. "Do you still have a dry mouth and feel dizzy?" "Yes," Joe admitted. She moved closer to him, her face inches from his, and ran her hand up his thigh and along the edge of his shorts. "How do you feel when I do this? Does it help?" Jess asked. "It makes me feel more dizzy and dry," Joe confessed. "And this?" She lifted her hand up the fly of his shorts to his waist. He lost his breath. "It adds another dimension I can't describe." She leaned closer, looked into his eyes, and said, "This forces me." "What do you mean?" Joe asked. "It forces me to focus on how you turn me on rather than your volleyball skills," she clarified. "I have other skills besides volleyball," Joe remarked. "I'm not thinking about skills right now," she replied. He leaned in and kissed her. He felt the softness of her lips and her tongue against his. After a moment, he pulled away and looked at her beautiful face. "Why are you smiling?" she asked, her eyes sparkling and lips moist. "I'm amazed by your perfect lips, graceful eyelashes, and cute freckles." "You're perfect, Jessica," Joe said. "This is all just overwhelming," Jess murmured. They were silent for the next 2 minutes. A tear rolled down her cheek. She moved closer and kissed him. Again, her tongue pressing against his, her hand moved to the front of his shorts, testing his arousal. "I want to see what else I can make you feel." "Come with me," Jess said. She led him to her bedroom. She quickly pulled down his shorts and removed his shirt. Then she took off her sleeveless t-shirt, revealing her lace sports bra. She smiled as he glanced from her eyes to her bra. She removed her shorts and underwear, and his mouth opened slightly at the sight. She smiled widely, then slowly removed her bra. She approached him, grabbed his arousal, and her touch took his breath away. "I love making you feel like this, Joe," Jess said without breaking eye contact. She pulled him toward the bed. "I want you to make me feel something." She leaned back against the bed, loosened her grip, and placed her hands on either side of his face, pulling his head down. Within minutes, he proved he handled this task as well as volleyball. Just before her first climax of the night, a thought flashed through her mind: he is perfect. After more than a year of dating, their life evolved. They chose a Caribbean island for their wedding destination. After about 2 years, they got married, vowing to become one life, one love. They both loved having lovemaking, although Joe sometimes struggled to keep up with Jess. They bought an old house in a great location, and within weeks, christened every room. In the backyard on a moonless night, they were attractive. Joe once received a modeling offer, and Jess had the face of a cover girl. She had a C-cup and just enough fat on her 5 feet 8 inches body to be healthy. They were athletically built and stayed in excellent shape. They made good money, with her in technical equipment and him in software development. They had fun and worked a lot. His hobbies were mountain biking and photography, while hers included cooking, pop culture, and staying fit. Jess loved pop culture quizzes and showing off her cooking skills. Friends and family couldn't imagine a more perfect couple. They did everything together and agreed on almost everything, even politics. In an era where it was unpopular to be conservative, they both were, agreeing on candidates and bonds on local election days. Any disagreement was resolved immediately, even in front of others. Friends would smile and say, yes, they are perfect for each other. They excelled at their jobs and were respected team members. Joe's work in software development even helped Jess when she had issues with the new software package at her job. One evening, he heard her arguing in their office and went to see. After she explained the problem, he wrote a small routine that fixed it. Her work sped up, and the program worked better for everyone. She thanked profusely, both verbally and physically. The company credited Jess for improving the program, and Joe used the routine in his work. They aimed for a good life, managing finances to enjoy vacations, a better house, and better cars. Occasionally, Jess earned large bonuses from major projects. They would assess the market, buy and renovate homes, and rent them out. After 7 years, they owned 3 houses and a condo. Joe managed renovations and rent collection, solving problems and making upgrades like installing electronic locks, security cameras, and repairing sprinklers. These activities took up his free time, while Jess worked more at her company. One Saturday, shortly after their 9th anniversary, he planned to work on the lawn watering system at a rental property. Jess felt she lacked personal attention and took matters into her own hands. "Joe, baby, before you waste time with those water pipes, I need help with a problem," Jess called out. "Is there a visible leak?" he yelled from behind the garage door, about to head to his truck. "There aren't that many pipes going through our bedroom ceiling." "You better check it out," she replied. He put down his tools and went upstairs. Entering the bedroom, he froze, his mouth open. She lay on the bed, wearing only bud clamps on her chest, with a small toy humming. Her knees were pulled up and spread apart. "What the?" Joe exclaimed. "Oh, baby," she whined, breathing heavily. "I think you need to stay home and hang out right here, right now." Her brow was furrowed, and her lips were parted. Realizing he had been holding his breath, he dropped his car keys and tore off his clothes. Laying pipes can be a very complex task that requires a lot of thought and measurement. Completing the project involves extensive digging, threading, and pipe insertion. That day, he didn't leave the house but did plenty of measuring with his eyes and thinking with his lips and tongue. Digging, threading, and inserting parts of the project went so smoothly that they both experienced multiple climaxes. By the end, they had discussed having children once their finances allowed, and now that they owned several houses and had 6-figure bank accounts, Joe was eager to start that phase before they got older. However, she wanted to wait a bit longer to achieve a couple more career goals and ensure their financial future was secure. She got a promotion and felt she had a real career, not just a job. On their wedding anniversary, they won a cornhole game at a party thrown by friends and family with the theme perfect for each other. They then took a 4-day tour of vineyards in 2 rented limousines. When they returned home, Joe and Jess began shedding their clothes as soon as they walked in the door and celebrated their anniversary in the living room, on the stairs, and in the bedroom. Life was good. They were perfect for each other. Jess was promoted to Director of Divisional Services at work and was thrilled to tell Joe. They celebrated at Laude and again at home that evening. She met a new colleague, Curtis Stanley, who was tall, handsome, and in good shape. He was the new director of new accounts and traveled to their department monthly. Many women in the office were attracted to his easy smile, fashionable suits, stylish haircut, and flirtatious manner. Her workplace discouraged romantic relationships between different levels of the organizational chart, but there was no strict rule against relationships at the same level. The CEO, Miriam, was a divorced mother of 2 who enjoyed the company of handsome young men. Curtis noticed Jess and thought, "Damn, Jess is one hell of a hot thing." After learning about her perfect marriage, he decided that no marriage could be perfect without some physical adventure. Curtis and Jess went to lunch several times to discuss business since they were equals. Curtis did thorough research on her husband's job and her favorite places, activities, and foods. He saw that she was genuinely proud of her accomplishments and her recent promotion. In meetings and lunches, he often steered conversations to highlight her achievements and made her feel good about herself, telling her she was becoming a better person and more valuable because of her success. Their company focused its new account work on New York because it had several potential clients there, and his targeted accounts fell within Jess's zone. He frequently asked her to come to New York to explain how her division would provide excellent service once a client signed a contract. She excelled at this, and he ensured her contributions were highlighted, earning her praise from her boss and colleagues. He had deftly steered workplace discussions to emphasize her value and quality, making it clear how much the leadership team appreciated having someone of her caliber. When she visited New York for meetings, Curtis made sure they went to the best places and most interesting events. Jess looked forward to spending time with Curtis. A few months after her promotion, she became engrossed in this, and she and Joe were having love-making less frequently. Joe initiated a few discussions about their relationship, which usually turned into her complaining about work and stress. To make amends, she planned to surprise Joe for their anniversary by booking a September trip to Italy, a place he had always wanted to visit. She told him about it in May, and they celebrated by spending the day in bed or looking at places to visit during the trip. A few weeks later, her company scheduled an executive retreat for July in Miami, and she had to attend. She made a big decision and told Joe about it over dinner. "Joe, honey, I have bad and good news. What do you want to hear first?" "Just put it out there, baby," Joe replied. "Okay, I've decided that to save money so we can continue to grow our family, the September trip to Italy this year is being pushed back to a future date, and we'll be going to Miami in July instead." Joe was silent for at least a minute. "I thought you were having an executive retreat in Miami in July, baby." "Yes, this is great for us. We get a hotel room paid for by the company for the week, so that saves us a lot of money. It's a great holiday destination and party town, with lots of great beaches and restaurants. I bet we can even play volleyball on the beach." "But if you're working, how will we play volleyball or do anything together?" Joe asked. "Work should be finished by lunchtime every day, and we can stay the following weekend to make sure we have time just for ourselves." "Darling, well, baby, I think we have enough money in the bank, and I'd love to spend a week in Miami, but I don't see why we have to cancel our trip to Italy. I haven't been in the new place too long, and I don't want to fly away so soon and remain in the dark for 2 weeks. I also don't think we'll ever have too much money in the bank, but that's beside the point. I have already canceled my tickets for September. We'll just have to restart this process sometime in the future, and now we can plan some fun things for Miami." Further discussion changed nothing. Joe decided to make a restaurant reservation in advance and look into volleyball tournaments happening while they were in Miami. Before leaving for Miami, Jess took another trip to New York. She never gave details about her trips, and when he asked about her activities after work, she usually mentioned dinner meetings with potential clients or solving a major problem with a West Coast client, taking up her evening on East Coast time. Miami was a great place to relax and enjoy the beach, and the restaurants were excellent too. They arrived on Sunday afternoon, checked into their hotel, and spent some time on the beach. They even played an hour of volleyball and a couple of matches. It was welcome night that day, and Jess asked if Joe could attend. Her boss, Miriam, the CEO, allowed it. At the dinner party, Jess spent time with Curtis, which Joe didn't like. When he suggested she stay close to him or leave, she insisted it was just business, reminding him they were there for a business retreat. Noticing Joe lingering, Miriam, who had always found Joe attractive, started talking to him. She knew he was a technician in another industry and a competent person. After a few drinks, she became flirty, running her finger up and down his arm and grabbing his wrist. Joe politely made it clear he wasn't interested and walked away to the restroom to escape her. Miriam felt awkward and disliked it. The event finally ended, and Joe convinced Jess to hang out with him at the bar for more drinks, but Curtis soon joined them, cutting their time short. They decided to call it a night. Once in their room, Jess was too tired for any amorous activities. As Joe had feared, Jess's work sessions often ran much longer than expected, frequently until 5 p.m. With 4 nights of executive-only events, Joe would often sit in the hotel hallway waiting for her to finish work. He did get some volleyball time, and the beach was full of attractive women, but their attention wasn't what he wanted. Miriam, still resentful over Joe rejecting her advances, noticed Curtis making harsh remarks about people below the executive level and joined in. Later, she used Joe as an example of worker bees versus supervisors during hiring discussion. Miami wasn't a big anniversary celebration. Including weekends, they had lovemaking maybe 4 times. It was a disappointing anniversary for Joe, though Jess left feeling excited about her position in the company. When they returned from Miami, life resumed as usual. Joe worked, and Jess spent a lot of time working in New York. Whenever Joe asked about her time there, he received the standard answers. In mid-September, he tried to discuss it again. "Baby, until this year, I never thought your company was so focused on New York." "What changed?" Joe asked. "You're right, dear. That wasn't the case before, but now we're growing quickly, and it helps to have a critical mass of customers in one place so our people can handle multiple problems in one trip." "Why are you so busy with sales?" Joe questioned. Miriam says having a post-sales service person with a client during part of the sales process results in higher closing rates. It seems to work. This is all part of a year-long push, and it should slow down after this. The company will still look for sales, but the focus will shift to services more than sales. I have more meetings in New York this week and then just a trip to the Midwest in the first week of October. Joe was looking forward to having her home for the next week and hoped that once the year-long push was over, they could get back on track. They become more like roommates, and their physical closeness was reduced to about 4 times a month. Jess returned from New York on Friday. Joe welcomed her with grilled steak and her favorite wine. She hugged him and gave him a brief kiss. A little later, she poured herself a second glass of wine. "Thank you for preparing this wonderful meal, dear. It's like a holiday," Joe said. "Baby, I'm just happy you'll be home for the next week. I hope we can relax a little," Jess responded. "The relaxation will be too short, honey," she replied. I need to return to New York on Saturday evening, tomorrow. I thought you'd be home all next week. What about the weekend? Joe was clearly upset. I'm really sorry. This is how the plan falls apart, she said firmly. Joe stood up and silently put away the dishes. She sat like a leader, watching him move around the kitchen and dining room while sipping her wine. They barely spoke. Feeling that the evening wouldn't be enjoyable, he moved into the laundry room and started loading laundry. Do you have anything I can wash before you leave, Jess? He called out. No, that's not necessary, Joe. Everything is clean, she replied. You just returned. It's usually expensive to do laundry at a hotel. Does your company pay for this? He asked. No, I did it at Curtis's apartment, Jess admitted. What? Why is that where you stayed the last couple of times in New York? Joe looked at her silently, his mind in shock. It didn't make sense. Were you trying to save money or something? Or why did you stay with him? No, this wasn't about saving money. Look, there needs to be some change in our lives, in my life. Soon I'll be looking at 40 in the rearview mirror. When I reflect on my life, I want to see certain things. If my life stays the way it is, these things will never happen. The last 2 meetings in New York brought this all to the surface. Joe, now I'm the executive director, working with top managers. I've been collaborating with another director in our company for months. After work, we go to Broadway shows or the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We dine at the Rainbow Room and places like Luger, doing fun and elegant things. He always wears impeccable tailored suits and treats me like a queen. These are the images I want to fill my life with. Joe, you're a good guy and we had great times, but I can't see someone like you in the life I envision. You will always be a good guy, a good-looking guy, content to be a lower-level service provider, the guy who installs door locks and sprinklers. You will never become a leader. You will never be what I want or need. We are just different people. But baby, we talked about children and our future together, Joe said. I don't think my body has time to slow down to have babies. It won't happen, Joe, Jess replied. Damn, did you sleep with that guy in New York? Joe asked, his voice rising. You have no right to ask me that, Jess snapped. Why not? I'm your husband, the person you married and once said you loved, Joe retorted. This is my body. I will sleep with whoever I want. If I want to sleep with the entire New York Giants football team, it's none of your business. I think I never really loved you, or should have. You need to understand it was a mistake and be mature about it. I'm filing for divorce, and don't call me baby anymore. It's not appropriate for someone who isn't your wife, or won't be. We will no longer sleep in the same bed, she declared. Joe was completely stunned. Various thoughts swirled in his head. Strike this idiot, knock some sense into Jess, throw her out, pack his bags, and leave. What did he do so wrong that she felt the need to look elsewhere? Was he really a lower-class man compared to Jess or this other guy? Let me try to understand, Jess. You're divorcing me because you prefer to be with another man who you think is better than me, right? Joe asked, struggling to keep his composure. Oh, no, yeah, I guess that's a fair summary, Joe. When you were first promoted, you didn't feel it. We celebrated and talked about how this could change our plans for kids. Since then, I've realized we're just different people, Jess explained. But you always told me we were perfect for each other. Why not now? After spending time with some idiot director, did you get this idea from him? Joe pressed. It's not just about him, and his name is Curtis. Others see it, too, Jess said. What do other people say, or imply that I'm not good enough to be with you? Joe asked, incredulous. People you know and respect, Jess replied. Oh, really? Like who? Joe demanded. Miriam, you know, and Gloria, the financial director, and another director at work, Jess listed. Seriously? I thought Miriam liked me. So, your entire new executive group at work thinks I'm beneath you? Please, don't delay, Joe. Are you taking the guest room, or am I? It's really not suitable for us to share a bed anymore, Jess said, her tone final. Oh my God, Jess, I think all this time in New York means you've been sleeping with that other guy, Joe accused. Joe, please, it's over, Jess stated firmly. You're right about that, baby. I'll take the guest room, Joe said. Joe headed down the corridor and gathered his things for the night. While Jess was in New York, Joe searched for a family lawyer. He met an attractive blonde with sparkling eyes and a serious expression. When they sat down in her office, she asked, How can I help you, Joseph? Please call me Joe, and I feel more comfortable with Melanie, or just Mel. I need help with a divorce, Joe explained. I need details to give you appropriate advice, Mel responded. Joe explained the situation. Mel warned him about the possibility of physical misuse, asked about his feelings on reconciliation, and gave him a list of tasks to complete while she prepared the legal documents. He began taking the necessary steps to separate their finances and other legal relationships, such as car ownership. Dividing up the houses was difficult, so he and Mel worked out a fair offer. Joe notified their circle of friends and relatives. This action prompted an angry call from Jess in New York. You're an idiot. Who gave you the right to announce our divorce to our friends and relatives? Jess yelled. You did, Jess, Joe replied calmly. When? Jess demanded. When you said you were divorcing me and that you'd rather spend your life with that idiot in New York, Joe reminded her. I expected we would just mention it during family events instead of making a huge announcement. Besides, I didn't give you permission to say that, Jess fumed. What's wrong with the wording? Joe asked, confused. Jess read from the note she received from her sister. Unfortunately, I have to announce that Jess has decided to neglect her wedding vows and take a new lover from her company who seduced her. We will not be able to attend social events or otherwise participate in our former relationship with you as a loving couple. Please respect the sensitivity of our situation and allow us to end our marriage as soon as possible. What's wrong with this, Jess? It makes it sound like I was a fool who let herself be seduced by some smarter or more powerful guy, Joe said, bewildered. I stand by my opinion, Jess, although it doesn't matter now, does it? This has already been sent to everyone. You wanted a divorce, and I wouldn't. Stay married to you, no matter how much I loved you a week ago. As you pointed out, it's inappropriate to stay with someone who's essentially an admitted strumpet. I've been tested for STDs, and I'm awaiting the results. I suggest you do the same. If he slept with you while you were married to me, he could have slept with other fools who let themselves be seduced by him. You fool. She ended the call and almost threw the phone on the table. Although Joe got some satisfaction from this, he still didn't sleep well. He couldn't help but think about what he had done wrong. Thoughts of all the wonderful times they had together kept running through his mind, the trips they took, the places they made love, the ways they made love. The food seemed to lose its taste. Their lawyers did their jobs and the assets were divided. They each kept their own retirement accounts and the cash accounts were separated. Credit cards were canceled and reissued to individual accounts. He didn't want to live in the house they had lived in when they were in love, so she got it. He took the apartment since it was closer to the city center and better suited her new self-image. The documents were changed and recorded. He moved into an apartment since the two houses that remained were permanently rented out. His apartment was not far from the condominium they once owned together. 2 months after Jess announced the need for changes in her life, they no longer spoke except for legal matters. Occasionally, they saw each other at the same church or social events. The first time she brought Curtis, she insisted on reintroducing him to Joe. Curtis extended his hand and grinned. I've heard a lot about you, Joe. Joe looked him in the eyes but didn't extend his hand. I wish I knew where this was going when I first met you in Miami. He looked at Jess, shook his head, and turned away. As time went on, Joe divided their mutual friends into 2 groups, those he could trust and those who would likely relay anything he said back to Jess. Some people he decided would no longer be part of his close circle. He could still play catch or drink beer with them in a group, but he kept his feelings and inner thoughts to himself. Joe decided Neil Sedaka was right, breaking up is hard. When Joe's friends at work found out, they were very supportive. His boss called him into the office and sat him down. Joe, if you need anything, just let me know. This must be very difficult. If you need time or someone to talk to, I'm here. I've had relationship problems in the past, and sometimes it helps to talk things through, to make decisions and keep things organized. Thank you, Evan, for your kind words. I know it's hard to deal with all the aspects of this kind of problem, and if the thought of revenge hasn't arisen, it will. When it does, Joe, don't take any criminal action, like punching the guy, or anything that could land you in jail. A few minutes of satisfaction won't be worth potential years of legal pain and suffering. That might be good advice, Evan. Thank you. Now that you mention it, it sounds like you have some experience in this area, Joe said. Yes, maybe, Evan replied. What kind of revenge can someone in my position get? Joe asked. That's a good question. There are different types of revenge. Look at this like a programming problem, Joe. Lay out everything, specifications, risks, unacceptable elements like physical violence, and various areas for potential retaliation. Maybe financial, maybe legal, maybe social. Decide what areas are important to these others. Be creative, as you are in your work, Evan suggested. Okay, you've given me a lot to think about, Joe said. If you need time, just let me know, Evan added. Joe went out and sat down at the table to think. He got permission from Evan to use the conference room and got to work. Using an old board on an easel, he listed the following types of revenge: social, financial, professional, self-esteem, and legal. He decided to gather a couple of close friends from work to help him figure it out. They persuaded him to add physical and technical pain to the list. They created a matrix with these categories in the column on the left and ideas of revenge in each category on the right. Ideas flowed freely without judgment to encourage creativity, resulting in some outlandish and some promising ideas. At the end of the day, he took a photo of the board, placed it in an empty box, and put it in the closet at the back of the room. Evan called to say he hoped Joe would feel better and repeated his offer to help. However, he requested that Joe limit using other people's productive time to before lunch and after work. Joe thanked him for his patience. A couple of days later, a friend from church was playing racquetball with Joe. "Are you going to participate in the annual church beach volleyball tournament next month?" he asked. "Well, I hadn't thought about it," Joe replied. "My volleyball partner and I broke up." "I know, but it always puts you in a good mood. You might want to join the boys' team or something," the friend suggested. "Probably not this year," Joe replied. "Okay, I saw that Jess checked in and thought of you. Did she sign up?" the friend asked. "Yeah, mixed couples," Joe said. "Oh, what's the registration deadline?" the friend asked. "A week before," Joe informed him. "Okay, thanks for the reminder," the friend said. After thinking about it all night, Joe took out the board. Upon entering the office, he drew a new line at the bottom and added sports results to the first column. At lunchtime, he asked his revenge team to work on the matrix in the conference room. That same day, he made a few calls and went across town for a drink with an old friend from his university days. The next day, Ben, one of his revenge crew friends, walked into his office and closed the door. "Joe, how serious are you about getting revenge on Jess and her world?" Ben asked. "That's a good question. Why?" Joe replied. "Because a lot of what we put into the matrix could be construed as just letting off steam, and some of it could be criminal, like physical violence," Ben explained. "But that was only because you guys thought it would be funny. I'm not actually going to eliminate anyone. I have to admit that I wouldn't feel any remorse if that fool disappeared, but I wouldn't take any action to liquidate him. And at this point, I would never take Jess back. I could never feel the same way or trust her," Joe clarified. "Okay, good to know, but there are other areas where the consequences could be much greater than we might think. If you ever thought you might get back together with Jessica, you'd want to avoid things like this," Ben warned. "Never again on God's green earth will I enter into any relationship with her that involves trust, affection, or physical contact. I was ready to do anything to show her how much she lost by leaving me and our marriage. I want her to deeply feel that spitting on a person's love and trust has consequences. Love and trust are crucial to a full and enjoyable life, and she knocked all of life's expectations out from under the man who loved her and gave her his heart and soul," Joe stated passionately. "Okay, Joe," Ben said. "And yet, Ben, where did you get the from?" Joe asked. "I have a few more things to think about, and then we might need some advice from Evan or someone with legal experience. I'll call you back," Ben replied. Joe continued walking along the path. Some days were better than others. He tried to focus on work and volleyball. He found a new teammate and decided to participate in the tournament. At work, he erased the physical pain line from the matrix and directed his attention to new projects. He didn't hear anything else from Ben and figured it was probably just a mental exercise to remind him not to act impulsively. His boss didn't comment further on the situation. The volleyball tournament was a big event, attracting teams from neighboring states and other churches as an outreach program. It invited participants not affiliated with any church. It had grown significantly from the Sunday church event that Jess and Joe won 10 years ago. This year, it started on Friday and continued until Sunday lunch after the award ceremony. The churches hosted a huge barbecue feast. Jess and Curtis were quite a dynamic team and made it to the mixed doubles finals against Joe and his new partner, Dira "Dee Dee" Hughes. She was a stunning, green-eyed beauty in her, with fiery red hair that formed a halo around her head. Her skin was covered in freckles from sun exposure, stretched smoothly over her FB Cup figure, which she covered with the sleeve shirt she and Joe wore as a uniform. There was usually a decent crowd for the finals, but rumors of a grudge match drew even more spectators. Everyone wanted to see if there would be any emotional outbursts. The crowd was large. One potential issue could have caused tempers to flare. Joe didn't shake hands to start the match, claiming he had an arm injury and didn't want to risk it. Before the match went fairly smoothly, favoring Joe and D&D more than Jess and Curtis. Jess and Curtis were fast and strong, while Joe and D&D moved like ballet dancers on the court. They always seemed to be in the right place to hit the ball or make a shot. D&D was stunningly graceful, and her ability to fly into the air at incredible heights to strike or block left the audience in awe. During the second game, things took a different turn. About 5 points in, Joe stopped aiming for the open court and started targeting his opponent's legs. On one of these shots, he appeared ready to hit the ball into the open court, but then redirected it and struck Curtis square in the face, knocking him to the ground. The game paused for a few minutes as they wiped the blood from Curtis's nose. After that, Joe no longer aimed at his opponent. The match ended quickly in straight sets, 21-4, 21-0, a crushing defeat for Jess and Curtis. After the match, the teams met at the net to shake hands. Joe extended his hand, and Jess asked, "What about your hand?" "It's okay, ma'am," Joe replied. Then he said loudly, "Good game." Quietly, so only she could hear, he added, "You're a team of losers." Jess yanked her hand away and swung at him, but he dodged as deftly as he had on the court. She glared at him, checking if anyone else overheard. No one was close enough. Many viewers thought Jess's reaction was due to jealousy, seeing her as a sore loser. The awards ceremony went smoothly. Jess was upset when she learned that for the first time the small engraved plaque on the perpetual trophy would include not only the winners' names but also their opponents' names and the score. At the afternoon feast, Liam asked Dee Dee, "You seem familiar to me. Have we met before?" "I don't think so, Liam," she replied, "but I get that comment often." Dee Dee and I were friends in school, Joe explained. "We played volleyball together. She was always better and made it to the Olympics for the second U.S. team in beach volleyball. She injured her ankle and had to leave earlier than expected, but she was on TV a lot and often gets recognized." "That makes sense," Liam admitted. Later that evening, after Joe took D&D home, she invited him in for a nightcap. Once she had changed and they were settled on the couch, she said, "I know this started as a rematch, but during our training and today's tournament, I really enjoyed being together and spending time with you, Joey." She leaned over and kissed him. It was a long kiss that ended with her tongue lightly flicking across his lips as they parted. When he opened his eyes, he saw her lips. He noticed their wet contours and slightly unsteady position. His gaze trailed down the graceful lines of her jaw and neck to the top of her bosoms. The pattern of her freckles was a sweet counterpoint to her very feminine shoulders and figure. This fascinated him for a moment. He looked into her eyes again. Moisture was beginning to form, causing the green to sparkle in the soft lighting. "Dee Dee, I would really like to explore a relationship with you, but not now. I initially came to you for your performance, but now I think I may want more. However, right now it feels too much like a reflection of my past experiences. You deserve better than to be in a remake of an old story. I want to go on dates and get to know the D&D you are now. This is more than fair. I really appreciate this perspective." "I don't want to be anyone's reflection," Joe said. They finished the whiskey and agreed on a date in 3 weeks. He walked back to his apartment after a gentle kiss. The divorce was final, and Jess and Joe were now living separately. Legally, they were aware of some major events in each other's lives because they lived in the same part of town, had the same friends, and attended the same church. Back at work, Ben asked Joe how he was feeling and if he was ready to erase the Matrix. Joe thought and said, "I still feel I haven't resolved 10 years of lies, or 10 years of love that was so worthless, it could be discarded like an old shirt for a new one. Okay, the idea I had has evolved, and I think we should look at the Matrix so you can decide how extreme you want to respond," Ben said. "Extreme? How so?" Joe asked. "This could have long-term consequences," Ben clarified. At noon, the V crew gathered in the conference room, setting up the Matrix board. Before they started, Joe said, "Ben came up with a new point in the legal row, but first let me fix this." Joe rewrote the category physical pain, and in the square next to it, in red, he wrote, "Bloody nose from volleyball." He continued to write in red for the social humiliation of his initial divorce announcement and his sporting humiliation. "Red means it's done. Now it's up to you, Ben." After Ben explained his idea, the room fell silent. His remarks concerned 2 aspects of the same action. The first action he had already discussed with Evan and was in the process of doing, but the second was left to Joe. A discussion followed about the pros and cons of the actions. The meeting adjourned, leaving Joe to decide whether to take action or not. Joe took a few weeks to consider his options, and his life moved on. He made his decision and moved forward with his life, which included finding out that Jess was pregnant and living with Curtis in the apartment she got after the divorce. Joe hadn't gone to church since the volleyball tournament, but one Sunday after church, he ran into Jess in the parking lot. "Are you going to congratulate me, Joe?" Jess asked. "I thought your hot body was too precious to bear children, Jess, or was his top-class seed too strong to resist?" Joe retorted. "It must have been top class because it wasn't planned," Jess replied. "Loser, how long?" Joe asked. 7 months, Jess said. "So you didn't even wait until the divorce was final to get pregnant?" "A top-class seed is a top-class seed," Joe sneered. "Loser." "As I recall, looking at the trophy in the church window this morning, you and the idiot are losers," Jess shot back. "And you're an idiot, just a simple-minded, low-class idiot, a loser in life who will never achieve anything," Joe spat. "Just in case you're wondering where I am, if you don't see me next week, Curtis and I are going to Monte Carlo for a vacation, a top-class vacation," Jess said. "Loser, keep an air sickness bag handy," Joe suggested, turning away. "Bye, loser," she said as she got into the car. Decisions had been made, actions had been taken, life went on. Jess's company encountered problems that began to complicate the situation. Miriam was on edge, as were the CFO and general counsel. As with all modern companies, this anxiety rippled through the organization. Several people were laid off, and budgets were tightened. problems at work exacerbated tensions in Jess's apartment. As her pregnancy progressed, Curtis became less interested in doctor's visits and other events associated with childbirth. Changes at work interfered with his travel schedule, and he became increasingly irritable. His move to their city from New York did not make him as happy as he thought, and their relationship with the upper class became strained. The root cause of the company's recent problems was identified as a legal issue regarding their software. It turned out that the company they hired to create a critical software product had used a program that belonged to another company without permission. Since Jess's company paid for the product and shared ownership, they were also responsible for the stolen code. To make matters worse, her company and the software company were selling modified versions of the program to other companies for use in their service delivery processes. The software had been in use for several years, and no one could remember who was responsible for using the stolen code. People were laid off from the software company, and legal costs were taking a toll on Jess's company. The legal owner of the code demanded licensing fees and all the money Jess's company had earned from the software, plus fines. After months of legal battles, the options remained unchanged. Jess's company could either stop using the program or enter into a licensing agreement to pay for the rights to the key code. The software company that developed the program had recently closed down, and its employees had dispersed into the industry. Not using the program and trying to replace it would put Jess's company out of business due to the time required to develop a new solution. They were forced to make a cash deal for licensing, resulting in a 10-year declining payment schedule with high initial costs that would decrease to a reasonable annual figure. The financial strain led to even greater turmoil at Jess's company, with salaries and commissions cut or eliminated. By the time Jess's baby was due, she and Curtis were barely civil roommates. One day, Jess came home to find most of Curtis's things gone, and he was taking the last items out of the closet. "What are you doing, honey?" she asked. "I left the company for a new job on the West Coast. Need to go, got a plane to catch," Curtis replied. "When will you be back?" "Our baby is due any minute," Jess said, her voice trembling. "I don't plan to return." "You have health insurance to cover the birth," Curtis said flatly. "But what about raising and caring for him?" Jess asked, panic rising. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't for me. "You know what kind of person I am, Jess. I love good restaurants, art museums, and holidays in Monte Carlo. I don't like diapers, strollers, or postponing vacations because of a child," Curtis explained. "Curtis, how can you say that? I thought you loved me. I thought our relationship would return to normal after the baby was born," Jess pleaded. "I have to go, Jess." "Bye," Curtis said, closing the door behind him. Jess collapsed on the sofa in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Suddenly, she felt a gush of liquid. "Oh my God, my water just broke," she thought, trying to pull herself together. She called a friend from work. "Gloria, could you help me? My water just broke and Curtis is at the airport leaving," Jess said urgently. "Oh God, Jess, I'm afraid I can't. I met my sisters 2 hours away. Try calling Anita or Susan. I'm sorry I can't help you right now." Gloria's cell phone went offline. Jess called the other 2 ladies. Anita's phone went to voicemail, and Susan's phone was not set up to receive messages. Her body was telling her there was no more time to waste. She stumbled into the bedroom, grabbed her baby bag, and headed to the car. She had difficulty getting into the BMW, but managed to open the door, throw her bag on the passenger seat, and get behind the wheel. She made it only half a mile before realizing she couldn't continue. The contractions made driving too difficult and dangerous. It dawned on her that someone else she knew lived very close and could get there quickly. She found the number on her phone and pressed the icon to dial. "Hello, is this Jess?" answered the voice. "Oh, thank God, Joe, are you at home? Please help me right now," Jess pleaded. "Yes, I'm here. I was just getting ready for the evening." "What do you need and why are you calling me?" Joe asked, confused. No time to explain. She didn't want to argue. If she had gotten to the point where she needed help and didn't want him to refuse, she thought he would respond to a simple plea. "I'm in my car on the street in front of the Ashton Glen Apartments. Please come right now. It's a matter of life and death," Jess said urgently. "I don't think you're dying, but I'm heading out now since you're very close," Joe replied. "Thank you very much," she ended the conversation. Another wave of contractions hit Jess. She left the headlights on, turned on her hazard lights, and winced as another contraction hit. Joe arrived about 3 minutes later, stopping at the curb right in front of her car. Her headlights illuminated a canary yellow Audi. Joe got out and walked over to her car. She rolled down the window, luckily between contractions. "Thank you very much for coming, Joe," Jess said, her voice strained. "Do you need help with the car, Jess?" Joe asked. "No, my water broke. The baby is due now, and I need your help to get to the hospital," Jess explained. "Where's Curtis?" Joe inquired. "He just left for the airport," Jess replied, her voice breaking. "While you're giving birth?" "Just call him back," Joe suggested, incredulous. He won't return, Jess said, starting to cry again. What do you mean? Joe asked, bewildered. He broke up with me. He doesn't want a child, Jess managed to say through her sobs. I can't understand you if you're crying, Jess, Joe said gently. I'm really sorry. I'll try not to, Jess said, trying to compose herself. Is he going back to New York? Joe asked. No, he left the company due to our financial difficulties. He got a job on the West Coast, Jess explained. Another contraction overwhelmed her. I'll help you get to the hospital, Jess. First, give me your phone. She handed it to Joe. He dialed the number. Yes, thank you, operator. There is a pregnant woman directly opposite the Ashton Glen Apartments on Avenel Drive. Please send an ambulance. Her water is broken, and she's sitting in the driver's seat of a silver BMW with flashing lights. If you need more information, you can call this number back. He shoved the phone back into her hands. Can you take me there, Joe? I don't want to spoil my new car, Jess said weakly. Where did you get it? It looks very expensive and your suit looks really great, Joe remarked. It turns out that the program I wrote to help your company's new software work properly is owned by my company because my employment agreement gives them ownership of everything I create while working for them. But if the employee creates a huge cash flow, he gets a percentage of what he earns. Because your company sold the use of the program to other companies, all of those companies owed my company huge licensing fees. Remember those 6-figure bonuses you used to get from time to time? I received a 7-figure payment, and more payments are coming soon, Joe explained. Another wave of contractions hit Jess. Jess, I see you are in no position to have a real conversation. The ambulance should arrive soon. I have to go. I have a date. Bye, Jess, Joe said. Another painful and demanding wave hit Jess. Joe turned away and walked to his new car. Joe, could you stay until the ambulance gets here and then take care of my car? Jess pleaded. I don't think so, Jess. That's what a husband or at least the father of the child would do, Joe replied, coldly. Joe, Jess called out desperately, opening the car door. Joe stopped, turned around and said, I think I can say that this idiot is an idiot and you are a cheating strumpet. You and that idiot Curtis are perfect for each other. He got into the car and drove away.